Oh, hey class, I didn't see you there. Sorry. I still don't see you actually, but I do see Tim and Joe back here. They're gonna listen in. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a video that kind of helps you review for the final that we've got on Friday, and so how you can best be prepared for that. So first thing is that as it turns out, the test is multiple choice, so that in some ways makes it easier, but I also wouldn't let that fool you because they've designed the different options to be like, they'll make mistakes that I've seen you guys make, and so they'll tempt you to pick one answer over another. But there are some good things about it being multiple choice, and there are kind of a lot of questions, close to 80 I think, although some of those I'm going to take out because they're on chapters we didn't get to finish. But there are a lot of questions, but they are multiple choice, so you will want to bring some paper. For one thing, you're going to want to bring some scratch paper to just, as you come across the problems, so that you can, do your calculations or whatever. On the scratch piece of paper, you'll want to bring a calculator. I don't know that there's a ton that need calculators that I remember, but still I would bring one anyway. And then you can also bring some notes, which is kind of what some of this is going to be about, helping you determine what will be useful to know and what you could put on a note sheet for taking into the final. You can use a couple pages, but probably 1 page front and back will be about what you would need, I would think. So what else? Was there something else? But I was going to go over, kind of look back over some of the chapters and some of the concepts that we need to be studying and kind of remembering how to do certain things, as well as definitions. So your sheet can have written down a number of definitions of certain things, because it will use words in the final, and if you don't remember what they are, you'll want to have a way to reference that, because we're not going to have our books handy, but you can have a note sheet. So pulling things out of the books will help. Now, so a couple ways you could prepare on this. One is there's a final review section in the back, which has a couple of practice tests. These aren't multiple choice, they're just regular questions, but these are along the lines of some of the questions that you might come up with or come up against on the test. So just looking through them, and if there are any that stick out as, oh, I can't remember how to do that, then maybe look a little closer at that. Not everything that this covers is on the test, and there might be a couple things on the test that aren't covered in these questions. I don't know, because I didn't go through all of the practice test stuff. But in general, that will be a good way to look through it, as well as I will give you some terms that will be helpful to know. And remember, there's this index in the back of terms, so anytime you run across something, it's like if you're looking through those practice tests and you don't know what a term means, you can come back here to the index, find what page it's talked about on, and go back to that and study. The majority of the questions do come from, I think, kind of more of the later stuff, like particularly chapters 9 through 13. So 13 is the one that we're just finishing working on now, but those are going to be where the bulk of them are. There are some things from previous chapters, but because those previous chapters were kind of building up to the later chapters, there's not as much directly from there, but I will kind of help you see what concepts to get from certain chapters. And then the other way you can study is going through each chapter. Again, we're going to kind of walk through them a little bit together, just to kind of help. But going through each chapter, you can flip through the lessons, one at a time. But there's also a nice thing at the end of each one, right? Which is a summary and review. I was trying to find one, but I'm just flipping through it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure you've seen them. There's summary and review sections that kind of go through each lesson and what was learned from it, and the basic concepts that you would need to know. It would be good to go through those read through them and kind of try to remember. When you are in some of the later chapters, it might be helpful to, some of the lessons have, they'll have like a formula or something that will be good for you. Obviously the quadratic formula is a good thing. You're going to want to write quadratic formula and write that whole thing out because you won't remember it. And so having that on hand will be useful. And then there are some cases where it might help to like look at, at the example problems. So you could write down an example problem and then sort of how it's solved a little bit or what the answer is, to kind of remember how those types of problems are solved. But anyway, let's go ahead and just jump in and go through what I think are the important things. So the first chapter, I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot from that because, it was really basic and that's some of the stuff we've been using this whole time. But I think there was something I pulled out from that would be good to remember. Mainly, there are a couple of word type problems. We kind of avoided those. There's not a whole lot throughout the book, but there are some of those kinds of problems where it's describing a situation like, I don't know, I could probably just randomly find one. Like Mr. Vanderbilt bought some gold at $170 per ounce. How much did he pay if he bought X ounces? Stuff like that. That was just out of the first chapter. But there are a couple of those types of problems in the test. Again, not a lot, but just remembering how to set up a problem from a word problem and then turning that into some kind of formula or something is good. The other thing from that is that you'll want to remember, in general, you've been using this throughout, but I don't think it describes it in this way, but you can do this, this is the order of operations. So when you have something like that, right? It's not 4 minus 5, which is -1, and then that times 3. You do the multiplication first. So this stands for parentheses, exponents, and multiplication and division, and then addition and subtraction. So always start with what's inside parentheses first if you can, and then you start moving on to exponents and multiplication and division, kind of in this one section, and then addition and subtraction at the end. So just having that handy would be good. That's pretty much it from chapter 1. Let's go to chapter 2, whatever it was about. That was about functions. From there, let me see if there was anything that was good to remember. I don't know that I pulled out very much of anything from that. I don't really have anything that I took particular note of from that because it just plays into all of the other things that we're doing, the equations and stuff. It's just the basic version of that, and so there's more helpful things later on. So, again, it wouldn't hurt to just look through chapter 2 and just kind of remember, oh, this is one thing I'll just tell you to be helpful. As it turns out, graphs are just not a part of the final at all. So, yeah. Cheers. It's too bad I actually like graphs. But yeah, they're just not. So learning how to read a graph or make a graph or anything like that is not going to be something that you need to worry a whole lot about. Okay, and then chapter 3 is about integers. Knowing what an integer is useful. I didn't actually bring anything to erase. Yeah, integers are they're like whole numbers, but they can also go negative. So -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on in both directions. Those are integers. So fractions are not integers, or anything with decimals is not integers. So that is, just good to have down. The other thing that is going to be useful and important in general is negative numbers. And I think that is actually what a lot of this lesson is about, kind of how to deal with negative numbers. And those are the ones that we tend to forget, and this would be good not to forget. So reviewing your rules on negatives, there's a couple of things. For one, it's just good to remember if you had something like sorry, I don't know if you can read this or not, but if you had 4 minus 2, that is the same as 4 plus negative 2. Just in general, that's useful to know for, for certain things. But it's also things like negative, if you had negative 3 squared, for example, that's negative 3 times negative 3, which is going to be positive 9. Okay, what if it was negative 3 cubed? What would that be?
Negative 27.
Okay, yeah, that's negative 27, and it's really only Tim and Joe that can answer out loud, right? But you were all at home were shouting your answers, I'm sure. So yeah, because a negative times a negative is a positive, but 3 negatives would make negative, 4 negatives would make positive, so on and so forth. And so things like fractions, you'll need to know, like there have been those kind of problems that are like, what is negative 3 over negative 1? Something like that.
Negative 3.
It's negative 3.
It's negative 3 because there are 3 negatives, so that goes negative, positive, negative. If it was just this, negative 3 over negative 1, then it's a positive, then it becomes positive. So just keeping your negatives straight will be useful. Okay, and then that's 3. Let me see if I got anything else out of that one. Let's move to 4. Chapter 4 is about, I think it was about rounding and stuff like that. Oh, rational numbers. Yeah, so this is now moving on from integers to fractions and decimals and things like that. Hold on, I'm going to get something to wipe this off. I don't want
Joe.
Hi! Welcome to Elmo's World. We're gonna do math today. Bye! Welcome them to Elmo's World.
How are we not surprised?
Well, remember, Dad, I get to do my little dance at the end of the thing.
Well, we all know Joe loves Elmo, so he wants everyone to go to Elmo's World.
Okay, so remembering your places and what they're called is good. So like, man, this one's not doing too hot, is it? Is there another marker over there? Can you see?
Marker. No marker. Oh wait. Red marker.
Let me see if it works. Don't.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
Let's find out.
All right, not too bad. Okay.
It works.
So, it might be easier to see, but anyway, we'll just go with this for now. So, right, I mean, I don't know that you need to know, like, this is tens, and then this would be hundreds place, and thousands place, and that's thousands without the TH. But past the decimal, this is the tenths place, this is the hundredths place, this is the thousandths place, this is 10 thousandths, I guess. But for the most part, these are the ones to remember. And so if it says, so for this one, if it says round to the nearest hundredth, what would you do?
1.35.
Yes. So that means we're going to round so that it's only, tenths and hundredths there. But we need to round to the nearest one, which means we need to look over here and see is that, which way it goes. Now, 5 means that we're going to round up. Anything less than that would mean that we would just keep it as 4. So that's 1.35. So that's rounding. So just looking through that chapter and remembering how to round and remembering those places is good. What lesson? What is this? This is chapter 5, right? Is that what I said? No, it's chapter 4. Let me see if there's anything else out of that. Rounding. There was one thing that might, this is a very specific kind of thing, but I may just go ahead and show it to you anyway, because I think it does come up in the test to some degree. So if I had x minus y, that's the same as -1 times y minus x. Because, you know, if you think about it, that's x plus -y, which you could switch around to -y plus x. And then if you were to, you know, multiply it by -1, or you could factor it, it's almost the same thing. Then it becomes -1 times y plus, well, plus -1 times x. Anyway, you don't have to go through the whole thing, but just remembering that you can flip something like that, x minus y, y minus x, by either multiplying or dividing by the -1. Okay, just a quick tip. Now we're going to move on out of chapter 4 to chapter 5. Let's see what it was about.
Garbage.
I think chapter 5 was about equations with one variable. Okay, so this is where we actually started solving for x. And remembering how to solve for x is good. Go back over. This would be a thing to write down. I hope you're just writing down in general, or you're going to miss it. So the commutative, associative, and distributive properties are talked about in this chapter. Knowing the difference between those and what they mean would be good. So you can write down the definitions of those, perhaps.
Can you say it again?
The commutative, I mean, I would give you the page number, but I don't know where it is. So it's in that chapter, though. Commutative, associative, and distributive. You could just mention like properties or something and you might find it. But those would be good. In general, this is where you will learn how to manipulate two different sides of an equation. So if you had like 4 plus x equals 2 or whatever, I mean, you know, this is real easy, but you could just, remembering that you can subtract 4 over here and subtract 4 over here, and then that becomes x equals 2 minus 4, which is -2. Things like that. You can do the same things on both sides. You can also multiply both sides by something, divide both sides by something. So remembering how to do that will be good to look back over. And then another thing that's going to probably be pretty useful over this test is just in general remembering how to check an answer. Well, I mean, like, okay, like, let's just say, again, this was a real easy one, but so I have this, right? Well, going back, I can now check it by saying 4 plus -2, which means 4 minus 2, but it's good to put your x in parentheses and just put whatever it is directly in there, equals 2. So 4 minus 2 equals 2, that checks out, so that is the right answer. The reason why it's good, I mean, I think there are some problems that will literally just have you plug things in like that, like check which one of these is a solution to this equation. And so you have a few numbers and then you can just plug them in. Another reason why it's going to be useful is this can solve a number of problems that would normally take you longer because it's multiple choice. Like it may give you an equation and says which one of these is a solution to this equation, and then you'll have A through B, which means that, you know, you can manipulate this equation some, but you can also just try these out and see, well, okay, does this one satisfy the equations? Does this answer satisfy the equation? And so you can eliminate answers that way or just find the right answer. So that's just a tip. You're kind of remembering how to plug things back into the equation. Let's see, was there much else from that? Yes, there is one other thing that's important. There are rate. Yeah, I would just study the last couple lessons, and you can just write this down because I don't know, I'm not going to have time to go through all of it. But there are rate questions. There's at least one problem in there that kind of goes over the I think it's just the distance equals rate times time kind of equation. Those were a while ago, But going back over and remembering, that formula as well as maybe a problem in there on how to do that would help you. So look over that. That's it for 5. So we'll move on to 6. Yeah, so that word problem. Again, they have the word problem, so I would look how those word problems are worded and see if you can remember how to solve those. But we'll go on to chapter 6.
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6.
Which is now where we get into 2 variables, like y equals, x plus 4 or whatever. But those, a lot of those, I don't remember if I have a ton from that. There's a little bit from it. Again, because it was so graph focused, you won't have as many. But remembering how the functions work, and again, I would look over a couple of the examples that have word problems from that, because I think there may be one that would be, or 1 or 2 that might be relevant as far as looking over how, if you were just given a scenario, how to turn that into an equation is good. But other than that, the one thing that will be good to remember is the slope. Remembering the slope of a line, in particular what the slope-intercept form is and which, so y equals 4x plus 3. That's the slope-intercept form. Well, it is in slope-intercept form. Y equals ax plus b, I think, is how they usually put it. But so this is your slope in this case. So just remembering that, looking back over that will help. And that's pretty much it for that one. That was chapter 6. So we're moving along. About halfway. Again, I'm not going to go over how to do everything. I'm just trying to kind of give you some ideas of what to look at in particular. But again, it wouldn't hurt to just flip through a lot of it. Chapter 7, simultaneous equations. Okay. Here's the good news about that. So simultaneous equations we did, I think that was just in that chapter. We didn't do a ton after that from what I remember. And there's not a lot from the test on these. The good thing about this, it's actually somewhat similar to the quadratic equation chapter that we're doing now, in that it gives you 4 different ways to solve the same problems. So just remembering how to solve in a couple ways would be good. You don't necessarily have to remember every possible way to solve one, but pick the easiest 1 or 2 and maybe study those. So again, the simultaneous equations are just if you had y equals 5x plus 3, and then down here you had x plus 6 equals y, or whatever, I don't know. And then knowing how to get them both in the same kind of form and how to solve them is useful. There's not a lot of problems on it, fortunately. But you still need to know how to do it. That was, what chapter were we on? That was 7. Let me see if there's anything else from there. I think that's pretty much it for that one. Okay, yeah, so then chapter 8 is about exponents. Okay.
Those were...
Yeah, you need to know a fair bit from that, not just because...
There'll be a million exponents.
Yeah, not just because there are questions from that chapter, there are, but because knowing how to use exponents is good for even all the later lessons. So going back, so that would be a really good one to have some good notes on, because it kind of, I think in the summary, it gives you a list of some of the rules on the exponents, or you could flip through the lessons and see what those specific rules are. Things like, so x squared plus x cubed, you can't add them together, really. But x squared times x cubed, what do you do?
X to the 5th.
Now you add the exponents, so that equals x to the 5th. So that's one rule. There are 4x squared. That's in its simplest form. The squared only applies to the x, but if it was 4x squared, now everything is squared, so that becomes 16x squared. Things like that are good. Can you see that? Barely.
Yeah.
That's all right. And then, what about this? X squared cubed.
This square gets
X6.
Yeah, this is multiplying exponents. So that's the one case like this. You don't multiply them, you add them together. But up here, now is when you multiply them. So x6. And what else from this? Also, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of little tricks or things to remember. Scientific notation. Remembering how that looks and works. Check it or go back and look over scientific notation, which is basically 4 times 10 to the 3 or whatever, and remembering what a negative exponent does. So do we like x minus 2, I guess,
x minus 2
equals 1 over x squared. Ooh, this thing's shaking all over the place.
Okay.
So yeah, going back and remembering how negative exponents work, or what about this? X cubed divided by x is what?
X squared.
X squared, because this is as if it's a negative exponent. So it's just subtracting in that case. So x squared. Okay, I think that covers everything. Let me see if there's anything else weird I pulled out of that stuff. Chapter 8, scientific notation.
Yay.
Multiplying and adding with exponents. Negative exponents.
exponents.
Yeah, pretty much that. All right. What about, this is actually from a later chapter, but since we're on the subject of exponents, what about the square root of x to the 6th?
X3.
Yeah, because that's when you divide it in half. This is essentially like saying, sorry, I'm always checking to see if I'm in frame. This is the same as saying x6 1/2. So just like we multiplied, this is, you're also multiplying. So it's, uh-oh, we're getting angry there. Hey, go ahead and turn on another one, please. Turn on something else. One more show. All right.
Daddy,
That's-
he's being mean to the camera.
What?
He's being mean to the camera.
No, I wasn't. I'm completely innocent.
All right. So that was 1 through 8, which was, I kind of mentioned, is somewhat lighter, and then you get to 9 through 13. I mean, I say that it's not like it's.
Because we already had the mid test there, so.
I think, I think exponent. I can't remember where the midterm was, but anyway, yeah. So then, lesson chapter 9. Oh, I'm still in exponents. How about that? Yeah, I guess that was where then it was the midterm. All right, so you were right. So chapter 9 is when we get into polynomials. Yay, that's what we've been doing for the, spring semester. So if, there are a lot more, maybe not a lot, but, there is more from this set than the previous set, but it's also more recent, so I guess that's good. So remembering the difference between a monomial, a binomial, a trinomial, just a polynomial. Those terms would be good to remember. So you can look back over those.
I remember.
A snowmobile.
Remembering what a square of a binomial is, what a square of a binomial becomes. Those are both in there.
I know what it becomes.
Knowing what the degree of a polynomial is. So, remember that's basically just
Biggest square.
I don't know why I did it this way, but anyway, yeah, because it's always the biggest exponent. So this would be a degree 4, that one. So knowing how those work, it's good, a degree. Knowing how to divide polynomials is one we haven't done in a while. So like, I don't remember exactly what kinds of things there were, but like this kind of stuff. You could either divide it the long division way. If I remember right, there were 2 different ways to do it. I can't remember exactly. And like some of you guys liked one way or another. I don't know that it matters. You can divide it however. If there were 2 ways, then you can pick a way. That is, again, that's kind of the case with all these. If there were multiple ways of solving it, you don't have to know all those multiple ways. You just need to know at least one way.
Except for the last one.
Except for the last one?
Last chapter. There's so many ways, and we're probably gonna have to review them all.
No, not really. I'll explain that in a minute, though. So so dividing polynomials, multiplying polynomials, or binomials, or whatever. Some of you guys have still kind of tripped up on that, just remembering that, like, okay, x plus 3 times x squared plus 2x plus 1, for example. That's a pretty long. You always just start with the first one and multiply by everything. So then that would just be x cubed plus 2x squared plus x. I just multiplied that, and then we go to this one. Plus 3x squared plus, and so forth. Anyway, I won't go through the whole thing. Also good to remember things like, so if that was a minus, then it's positive 3 times negative 1, or positive x times negative 1. This was a minus, right? Then it's negative 3 times positive x squared, negative 3 times negative 1, which is going to be positive 3. Just remembering stuff like that. But you can go back and look over that in the chapter. And
By the way,
No way.
that's it. Okay, I think that's pretty much it from that chapter. So that was 9. Got 4 more chapters.
I'll need 4 more, guys.
The next one, chapter 10, is on, oh yes, factoring. Factoring is going to be a good thing to review. So I would spend some time on this chapter in particular, 10. Knowing how to factor in general. So let me see, this is chapter 10. Knowing what greatest common factor is. I would maybe just write that one down, greatest common factor. You can also not write it down, but that just means that you'll have to watch this video again. Okay, and then, prime numbers, remembering what a prime number is. I mean, we've studied those, I think, in previous maths, but as far as kind of what they mean, but knowing how to factor into primes. So if you had, I don't know, man, like 42. Can you see that? It's like right where there's a light spot is. I'll write it down here too. 42. If we were to factor that, we have to factor it by primes, so we might start with a 2. So we have 2 times 21. Well, 7 goes into that. So 2 times 7. How many 7s go in there?
3.
Times 3. So now those are all prime. So that's the prime factorization of 42. Remembering that.
There's also other things you can do. Wait, worse.
So greatest common factors, it will ask specifically about greatest common factors. So factoring trinomials. I mean, that's what a lot of the chapter I think is about. But remembering, this is where our favorite thing, what is it?
The difference of 2 squares.
Difference of 2 squares.
Knowing
that one will help. So also remembering, how to factor out. So if I had like 3x squared plus 6x plus 9, what's the first thing I can always check? Like, can you see how I might factor that?
You can factor the squared numbers.
3.
Well, yeah, there's different ways to do the x squared plus something, x plus something. But we always start by just looking if there's any shared factors, greatest common factor, which is what that is. So they all have a 3 in common. So factoring that out first is always a good first step. Now you have x squared plus 2x plus 3. So now you can solve this in other ways, perhaps. I mean, I haven't paid attention to whether that one is gives you anything good or not. But remembering those. Let's see what else from that chapter. This was what we're on 10. Factoring the trinomials, the difference of two squares, factoring into primes. We've kind of done all that. I guess that's it. There are different ways to factor. I think, let me just kind of flip through it and see if there was anything I'm missing from that, just to kind of remember, like how to factor so also, this is important because it's going to want you to look at some things. So sometimes it will be like, factor this as much as possible, or something like that. I think it has questions like this. And it will give you an answer that is right, but it's not factored all the way. It's not factored as much as possible. So being sure so for example, if I had, how do I factor it?
Divide everything by 3.
Divide everything by 3.
And then x, how about?
Yep. Because it might have an answer that looks like...
What?
What?
It's 2x, Father.
I'm sorry, you're right. I wasn't paying attention. Thank you for catching that. Okay, so it might have that as an answer, but that's not factored all the way. I'm trying to see if you can actually see it here. Because they both still share another factor, which is x. So it's actually 3x, x plus 2. That's factoring all the way. So just being sure that you're always checking for factors. And then polynomials, I'm just flipping. There are a couple of ways of methods of solving it. You can just kind of look at the difference of two squares. That one's always helpful. But in general, how you factor a trinomial square, that's one of the latest questions. Or the last lesson, lesson 7, more on factoring second-degree polynomials. That's as hard as factoring gets, and it may be useful to write maybe one of those example problems down, something like that. But that's pretty much it for that one, which gives us down to the last 3. Chapter 11, fractions. Oh boy, that's one we're going to want to review for a lot of reasons.
First of all, because we're failing evaluation.
I'm scared of fractions.
Just going back over, again, with some of these later ones, I would just flip through each lesson just to kind of refresher, but also look at the summary. And then, I'm giving you some help as far as what specifically look at. I mean, remember what a numerator and a denominator is? Numerator is on top, denominator is on bottom. Knowing what simple fraction means, like what it means when it says like make this fraction as simple as possible or something like that. I believe it actually, you can go back here. Oh look, simple fraction is in the index, 463. So you could look at that. So it's literally in this chapter. So knowing what that is will help. And then knowing how to reduce fractions. Again, reducing fractions is really like factoring, right? It's kind of what that is. So if I had that, I'm kind of using the same ones over and over again, but so if I had this, for example, this is not a reduced fraction because I can reduce things further down because I can cancel, because 6 is 3 times 2, so this reduces to, essentially that. So that becomes x squared over 2x, but that's not reduced all the way because you've got x's on the top and the bottom. So this is really x over 2. So that's as reduced as that could be.
It's like factoring normal.
It is.
except in
It
fraction.
is just factoring. It's factoring the top and the bottom and canceling out. Also remember, this was a mistake we would make multiple times. I think is that 4 plus x over x. Can you factor that?
Nope.
No, because of this plus. You can't go 4 because that plus is important. If it was 4 times x, if it was 4x, you could do that. But 4 plus x or minus x, you cannot do that. Going back over that. Multiplying fractions is pretty easy, right? It's just multiplying the tops and multiplying the bottoms. But going back over that and just remembering kind of how that works. Again, you can look at some of this from the summary section on the book. Anyway, I don't really need to do this, but
There's one more.
yay. Oh, well. Oh, yeah. So this would be 3x over 6x because you multiply the top and multiply the bottom. But again, that one trick of like before you multiply, you can already start to cancel, which
So
means
X's.
these cancel. And really, this cancels with this, and then the whole thing just becomes 1/2. Okay, so you can maybe do some of that ahead of time. But dividing fractions. Does anyone even remember what that is? So if I had x over 6, I'm using all the same ones over and over. It's okay. Divided by
3.
2 over 3x. You want to remember what to do?
No.
It's really easy. It's like if you're dividing by this, it's the same as multiplying by its reciprocal.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
Just-
Do the flip thing.
just flip it. And multiply. So looking over that and writing a little note for that. Good idea.
Easy for remembering.
Yeah, right.
Reducing fractions, multiplying fractions, dividing fractions. And then the other thing is adding fractions with different denominators. So like 4 over x plus 2 over x plus 2. That's going to be like, there are some things in there that look kind of like that. What will that equal? Well, how do we get it? We have to, in order to add fractions, they have to have the same denominator.
So you have to multiply.
So you have to multiply something by something else. And in this case, you'll have to do both, right? You'll have to you'll have to multiply this one times x plus 2 over x plus 2, because I'm taking that. And then this one I'll have to multiply by x. X over x. Okay, so that gives us with, I don't know, 4x plus 2 plus 2x is a big old equation. X over x plus 2. And then you can, oops, that's supposed to be parentheses. Anyway, oh, sorry, I'm realizing you can probably not really see that, but it's just that's the denominator. Anyway, then you can start, you can try to multiply that out and see what you get and combine things, and I don't know whether that cancels or does anything. But anyway, but that's how you would do it. So just remembering how to get fractions so that they look similar so that you can add. So let's spend some time on that chapter. Oh, the last thing is the complex fractions.
No.
It was like x over like 1/2 plus
Those were not meant to be.
plus x squared, or something. Anyway,
Why?
and how, so you can kind of start down here, simplify it by making this, well, okay, if this is the same as 2x squared over 2, and then you can combine this into one fraction, and then you can bring that up there. Anyway, remembering how to do that, and looking at that, I think that's the last lesson of that chapter. I know it's a rough one. There's not a lot on that, but there is a problem or two. I can't remember.
and you will die.
So look it over. All right, we're down to the last 2 chapters. How long has this been? Oh gosh, it's been long. It's okay.
How long?
45 minutes. It's about a class length, so that's fine.
Well, we're still going.
Okay, last 2. And I'm not going to spend that much time on this last one because you guys have been doing it. That's the homework you've been doing. Square roots. Good to know. There's multiple things about square roots. Let me see if I can just kind of truck through them here. Simple radical form. Look up simple radical form. You can look it up in the index. Simple radical form. It will tell you what that is. Because it will say, how is this expressed in simple radical form? And then some options. And if you don't know what that means, you won't know what to do. And getting square roots out of the denominator. You know, stuff like, how do you write that with no square roots in the denominator? Because that's how, oh man, I keep writing that like directly where it's, you can't see it. Let me just write it on here. So how do you write that?
Look a little bit there.
Well, you can just multiply this times square root of 7 over square root of 7. So then that becomes 4 times square root of 7 over 7. That's it. I don't know exactly why, but generally in math, people don't like to see square roots on denominators. So generally try to get them up, and because I think it will give you an equation, or it will give you something that looks like this and tell you to simplify it, and you're like, well, I don't know how to simplify it. Well, just get the square root out of the denominator. That's probably the important thing. Addition and multiplication under square roots, like so, if you had, 7 plus, I don't know, not that, but 4 plus 2, that's not the same. I can't do, well, square root of 4 is 2, so that comes out, and then 2 is on the bottom. Only if that was 4 times 2, then you could do that. So remembering how to do that in general. So again, factoring, that's what really all that is. Factoring it out and knowing how to bring something out will be good to study. And adding square roots. Anything else from that? I was thinking there was something. Oh, just adding square roots in general. So like square root of 7 plus 5 square root of 7 is the same as 6 square root of 7. So you can almost just treat the square root of 7 like an x. So x plus 5x is 6x. It's fairly simple, but it's in that chapter as well. And you will want to know. All right, last thing, 13, and I really only have one note. It's quadratic equations. Shocker. Who would have guessed? The good news is, and where I do want to there are at least a couple of things about quadratic equations in there. It's never going to say solve it in this way, right? Because it will be like, here's a quadratic equation. What are the solutions of it? Well, the things that we're learning in this quadratic equations chapter, like there are like 5 different ways to solve it. Pick the ones, I don't think, I might get in trouble for saying this because I didn't look that closely, but I don't think you need to know how to complete the square. I don't think you really need to know that. Especially as long as you know the quadratic equation. You don't really know how to complete the square. That's a fancy little maneuver you could do, but I can barely remember how to do it, so it's not that important.
Formula?
Quadratic equation. Sorry, I said formula, but okay.
It's an equation.
Yeah.
I like
Makes
doing the
sense.
square
Quadratic
one, but
formula.
I did fail at it, so I
Come on.
think I should do it.
So yeah, and remembering how to, so just the quadratic formula and knowing what the A's and the B's and the C's and all that. Anyway, I'm not going to go through a lot of that because you're studying it. I will be looking through your homework, so I could probably help you know what you're not quite understanding there. But I would remember the 2 probably best on those are solving them by the quadratic formula. Is it equation or formula? Now all of a sudden I'm like,
It's formula.
it's formula. Okay, I feel like it's either one. But
Come
I'm like, which one does it say in the book? And then solving by factoring. I think that one was the other good one. So remembering how to factor things out, because then you end up with like an x plus 6 times x minus 2 equals 0, then you can just look at the x's and what would make this part 0? What would make this part 0? And those are your two solutions. So it's good to kind of know those. The good thing about it, and you know, again, it's just kind of a tip, right? It will say like because it'll say what are the solutions to this quadratic formula or equation or whatever, or to this, yeah. And then you will have options. So in some ways you can eliminate some stuff early. Like you can work the whole equation, but you can also go down and say, well, it's not gonna be this one because if I plug that back into there, I know that doesn't work. So you can, you know, just a little tips on kind of how to save some time. So there's a lot of questions. I mean, I don't know that it's gonna be strictly timed. I'll have to figure out what kind of time we have, but we'll give you longer than maybe the normal class time, I guess, just to kind of get through the questions. But yeah, so I would just have some good writing utensils, have some scratch paper so you can make notes on different things. We will have a calculator. I guess I will be printing out the test sheets for us to work on.
Are we allowed to bring notes?
And you have a notes sheet, yes, or multiple if you need them. So of your own handwritten, I mean, you can type them up, I don't care, but you know, in other words, you're not bringing the book, you are bringing a succinct bit of notes that you can take for the test. So that's it. I would just make sure you spend some good quality time studying and making those notes and knowing how to do the different things where you have gaps, and we'll see you on Friday. And let me know if you have any questions on the chat. Okay, no, 2 minutes. All right, you're done.